Hello, my wonderful friends. Welcome back to our I Do Work Here Lady series, where we share stories about people who actually work at places but are mistaken for not working there. These stories are super entertaining, folks. In today's episode, you're going to hear 7 stories. The first is about a photographer who's mistaken for a creep. Yikes. The second story features a security guard who mistakenly yells at a man who owns a multi-million-dollar law firm. The third involves an off-duty employee who encounters a Karen. We'll finish up with a story about people claiming they know the owner when they really don't. I hope you all stay for these tales today. Please hit that subscribe button for future stories. Let's get into it. This first story is titled, "I'm a Photographer, Not a Mischievous Teen." This happened to me a while ago at a volleyball training school where I work part-time. My dad co-owns the place with 4 other people, 2 of whom are ex-professional volleyball players from Russia. At the school, we have different colored shirts for students based on their age range: green, blue, white, and a black shirt for staff. All of these have a giant logo of the school plastered on the front. Since I play soccer and have school to focus on, I only work there part-time. When I'm there, I do things like update rosters, take payments, and translate for people in Spanish, since it's my first language. Because I enjoy photography and my pictures are pretty decent, my dad pays me extra beyond my usual salary to take photos for their website and help with logos and color schemes for the game uniforms. Photoshop stuff, relatively easy. One Thursday afternoon, after completing some paperwork and finalizing payments, I went out of the staff room to take pictures of a class in action. Today's class was 8th and 9th graders. I had my uniform on, but because it was a bit chilly inside, I didn't bother taking my jacket off. I thought that as long as I kept it unzipped so people could see the logo on my shirt, I'd be fine. That was a mistake. I stood off to the side of the court, set my camera's shutter speed, checked to make sure the flash was off, and started snapping pictures. At this point, one of the girl's fathers came in to pick up his daughter. Normally, this girl's mother picks her up, so he didn't know the staff very well. There were still 5 to 10 minutes left of class, so he made his way over to the rows of chairs lining the walls of the gym. Then he saw me, a punk high schooler in his eyes, taking pictures of his poor freshman daughter and her classmates, perhaps for my own amusement. He immediately got up from his seat and stormed over to me. He demanded to know what I was doing, taking pictures of his daughter, and threatened to destroy my camera if I didn't hand over my SD card that second. I was so shocked by the sudden confrontation that I couldn't think of anything to say. So, I simply grabbed the side of my jacket and opened it up a little so the logo on my shirt became visible. The look on his face when he saw the staff uniform was one of absolute horror and shame. He mumbled a half-hearted apology and walked back to the seating area. Now, every time he comes in, he never speaks to me, even when the bill for the classes is due. He either waits until he's sure I'm not around or gets his wife to handle it. From what my dad tells me, he's actually a nice guy. He's just really ashamed. That's just an overprotective father doing his thing. At the same time, while I was standing on the side of the court taking pictures, I think most people would have been okay with that and assumed I was a photographer snapping photos of the team. But if I had been sitting in the bleachers, way in the back row in a corner with a camera, that's a different story. That's when it becomes a cause for concern. At least that's what I think. They should just pick up team jackets. This next story is titled, "Shabbily Dressed Guy Actually Does Work in the Building, Dude." Years ago, I landed a pretty sweet gig working as a security guard, shift supervisor actually, in a building downtown. It was a mixed-use building, so we had a food court, retail stores on 2 levels, and 5 office towers. When I first started, one of the things all guards were taught was to treat everybody they dealt with respectfully. The building did have a lot of transients and homeless people wander through, but we prided ourselves on being courteous and polite to everyone. One lazy Sunday morning, I got a frantic call from our building operator, who watches all the security cameras, telling me I needed to go to a specific bank of chairs on the 2nd floor. He was panicking, and I couldn't make out much other than one of my guards' names. I rushed over, worried that this guard, who's a bit of a loudmouth bully, might be in a fight or something. Oh boy, do I wish that was the case. When I got there, the guard was berating an older gentleman seated in one of the chairs. The man had a pile of papers and a coffee on the table in front of him and was dressed pretty shabbily, a pair of jeans, dirty running shoes, a faded and stretched-out t-shirt, and a leather jacket that had more scuffs than leather at this point. There was a worn-out laptop bag on the floor leaning against the table. The guard was nearly purple in the face, screaming at this guy to get out, pointing wildly and yelling harsh words about how we don't allow riffraff in here. I walked up, told the guard to cool his heels and said, "Hey, let's all just take a breath. What's going on here?" Then I greeted the gentleman in the chair and asked what seemed to be the problem. The gentleman got 2 words out before the guard went off on a tangent about how this homeless troublemaker was loitering and needed to leave but wouldn't get up. I shushed the guard and tried talking to the gentleman again. This time he got 4 words out before the guard interrupted again, now threatening to literally flip the chair forward to toss the gentleman onto the floor. I'd finally had enough of the guard and told him to go to the office and cool off, saying I'd deal with the gentleman. The guard begrudgingly left, and I apologized to the gentleman for the guard's overreaction. The gentleman said, "I appreciate it. I work over in X Tower on the 10th floor and forgot my keys." I was waiting for my assistant to arrive and let me in. I automatically offered to let him into his office. We do it all the time and have specific protocols for it, and he accepted. So we headed to the elevator. When we reached his floor and the doors opened, I realized where I was. Every single night we patrol every single office space in every single tower, except for 1 floor. That entire space is occupied by a legal firm worth millions, and we aren't allowed in their office, ever. Yep, I was standing on that floor. The gentleman stepped into the floor lobby, and I had to excuse myself to go get the keys for his office since we aren't allowed to carry a copy. He just nodded. I raced down to the building operations room, grabbed the key, and raced back as fast as I could. When I returned, I opened the office door, and the gentleman invited me in as he went to shut off the alarm. I then had to awkwardly ask him for his ID and to see his office to verify that he was allowed to be there. He chuckled and obliged. Then he told me he's the owner of the legal firm. He thanked me for letting him in, and I left. About 20 minutes later, the president of our security company arrived on site with 2 other people, and the guard who lost his temper was escorted off site. He was fired. As soon as I left, the lawyer called the building manager, who then called the security company, who came down personally. I got a nice compliment for how I handled things, and I learned why we have the rule of treating everybody with respect. Folks, this is why you don't judge people solely on appearance. A lot of wealthy people are really low-key, and it's easy to make yourself look rich by swiping a credit card. It's also amazing that the owner of the law firm kept his cool while being yelled at. But then again, when you know who you are and own a multi-million-dollar law firm, little stuff like that probably doesn't bother you. This story is entitled Karen Gets Hurt Because She Doesn't Listen. I'm going back to work because it's finally opening back up after the virus, and that reminded me of this story. Some moments are a little fuzzy since I was running on 3 hours of sleep that day. I work at a popular thrift store in Canada. When I was on maternity leave with my little one, I had to go into the store to buy more baby clothing, as he was getting too big for his younger clothes. I was browsing some household aisles when I heard a smash at the other end. I looked at my watch and realized most of the employees who would deal with this were on lunch. The policy is that if something glass breaks, one employee stands at the break point to stop customers from stepping on it, and another goes to get a broom to clean up the mess. Since no one was around, I decided, what the heck, I'm not in a hurry, and the baby's still sleeping in the cart. So I stood there, and my mother-in-law went to tell the cashier about the break. Most customers were regulars who knew I worked there and had just had a baby. Some even stood outside the glass to gush about how cute my little man was. Then this one lady who looked like a stereotypical Karen came near. I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I'll have to ask you to go down the other aisle and come back once this mess is cleaned up." She scoffed, looked me up and down, and said, "You're not the boss of me. Why are you telling me what to do? You don't even work here." Then she started walking on the glass. To be fair, the clothing policy at the time was all black, and I was wearing bright colors and a long flowing skirt. So I calmly said, "Ma'am, please stop walking. This glass could hurt you, and yes, I do work here. I'm just on leave with a baby." She replied, "What glass? There's nothing on this floor." She said that as she stopped to look at the shelves, never even looking down. I was 23 at the time, 24 now, and as she went to walk away, she slipped on the glass. I asked if she was okay, and she screamed, "Why didn't you warn me there was glass? I'll have you fired." I said, "I did warn you." At that moment, my mother-in-law and a supervisor, the only one available to clean up the mess, showed up. She's one of the best supervisors there. Luckily, the lady only got a small scratch on her hand from the glass. She said, "I want her fired." "Where is her manager?" Oh, so now she believed me. As I explained what happened, the lady kept trying to interrupt, but the supervisor kept holding up one finger to silence her. Another customer chimed in and said I was telling the truth and had warned her about the glass. The lady glared at me and said, "She's lying. She wanted me to get hurt. That's why she didn't tell me about the glass." I need to note that the glass was bright green. You can't miss it like you might with clear glass. The supervisor sent me off and dealt with the situation, telling me I could go to the break room to hang out with the other employees. I thanked her and went to the break room where my CO workers fussed over the baby and took turns holding him as I rested and told them what happened. I don't know what happened to that lady, but I was given a $20 gift card as a thank you for going above and beyond and doing my job even when I was off. It actually paid for most of my items after my discount. The next story is titled, I Do Work Here and You Need to Go. I work at a place that hosts nighttime events on weekends where we sell beer and have food. It's not a restaurant, it's all outdoors. We're family friendly, and due to the type of licensing we have, we're only allowed to sell beer, no other alcohol. At the time, my job was to walk around and make sure nobody was sneaking in outside drinks, as we occasionally get secret shoppers checking that we're following codes. One night, while making my rounds, I spotted a group with clear plastic cups and a bottle of wine, which we don't serve. I politely informed them that they needed to dump their cups and put the bottle away, and I wouldn't make them leave as long as I didn't see it again. They responded by saying the bartender sold them the bottle of wine. I informed them that this wouldn't happen because if wine were sold, we'd cease to be family-friendly and wouldn't be able to allow children at our neighborhood events. After I said this, they admitted they brought it and claimed they're good friends with the owner, who said it was okay. They added that they'd done it before and that I could ask any worker around and they'd confirm they're allowed. I realized they thought I was just another patron because I didn't have a uniform or tags, so I told them I'm an employee with the authority to kick people out who aren't compliant with our rules and to issue bans. I said I'd get their friend, the owner, to explain further if they misunderstood. This annoyed me because they tried to get away with it and could potentially get us shut down. So I dropped the leniency and asked them to leave. The next day, I was on shift in the morning for my normal duties when one of the group members arrived. He saw me working and rudely asked for the manager, saying he was going to get his ban lifted. I'm the manager of a different section of the business, but still have some authority over these matters, and I told him so. He dropped his smirk and said he'd like to talk to the owner. I suggested he call them since they're such good friends. He stormed off in a huff and hasn't returned since. This story is titled, Security, This Kid is Trying to Steal. I worked in an office handling a lot of paperwork and processing sales orders. I had plenty of experience in offices, and at my new workplace, I had been there for a few years and was promoted to team lead supervisor, if you will. I oversaw a group of individuals who entered orders, processed them, ensured they were fulfilled, and then invoiced them. There were other tasks in between as well, but I won't bore you with the details. At the time of this story, I was in my late 20s. Although I look young, people often told me they enjoyed working with me, and I helped make their work life easier. Recently, one of my employees moved to another department, so we had to hire someone new. I was away on vacation when the hiring process began, so the department manager, Rhonda, conducted all the interviews and hired a woman named Deborah, who had a lot of experience and was in her mid-40s. Honestly, the job isn't difficult. It's mostly data entry and paying attention to detail. Deborah started work about a week before I returned from my vacation, so she didn't get the chance to meet me. One early Monday morning, I was in my office, turning on the computer. I was going through my drawers to look for something when I heard footsteps behind me. At the time, I didn't know who this woman was, but you can probably guess it was Deborah. She entered loudly and said, "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I looked up, startled, and before I could say anything, Deborah shrieked, "Are you trying to steal the computer? Get out before I call security." I began to say, "It's all right. I work here, and you must be," but she interrupted, scoffing, "Yeah, okay, you work here." She rolled her eyes so far back I thought they'd come out of her nose. Then she said, "Last warning, leave now, or I'll get security to make you leave." Not wanting to cause more trouble, I stood up and grabbed my purse from under the desk, hoping to show her my ID. Deborah quickly stomped into the office and snatched my purse from my hands before I could reach for my wallet. I yelled, "Hey, what are you doing?" She snapped, "Nice try, you're not stealing this." Our raised voices finally drew the attention of our manager, Rhonda, who peeked around the corner and said, "What's going on here?" Deborah pointed at me accusingly with a bony, wrinkly finger and practically shouted, "She's trying to steal things from us!" Rhonda laughed and said, "No, Deborah, that's Kim, you know, the one who's been on vacation." Most people at this point would have looked shocked and apologetic, not Deborah. She had this weird, disgusted look on her face, scanned me up and down, and said, "This kid works here? This is Kim, the department supervisor?" I locked eyes with her and confidently confirmed, "Yes, I'm Kim, your supervisor." Deborah took a moment to process, then shrieked, "Are you kidding me? There's no way a kid like you is going to be my boss." I asked, "Are you going to have a problem reporting to me someone who's your superior but just happens to be younger than you?" She screeched, "Absolutely. There's no way someone as young as you is going to be in charge of me." I'll never forget how shrill her voice was or how red she turned. Rhonda interrupted and said, "Well, then it seems to me that this isn't going to work out, especially since there's a problem with respect. Let's go get your things." Cue the silent awkwardness that followed. Deborah looked like she was going to lose it. What could have been a simple misunderstanding snowballed into her losing her job. She tried to argue, but Rhonda wasn't having it and gestured toward Deborah's desk. As they walked away, Rhonda signaled me to call security, so I did and let them know what was going on. Security promptly escorted Deborah off the property. That's probably the only time I've ever been mistaken so horribly for a young thief, and I'm so glad I dodged a bullet with this woman. I'll never understand people who think they're superior based on age and seniority. It doesn't work like that, folks. This next story is titled, "Get Me Your Male Manager." If you've been following me for a while, you'll know I work in the trades. I'm an under 30-year-old supervisor at my shop, and a lot of guys we meet on sites or who start with our company don't respect me because of my age. I've worked with some 50 and 60-year-old guys who refuse to follow simple tasks I give them, either because they think they know better or because they don't want to take orders from someone half their age. I work in the parts department of a big car dealership and have been for a few years now. I've come across my fair share of frustrating customers who just can't use their common sense. For example, a customer wants a white paint pen. I ask them to give me the VIN of their vehicle so I can figure out which white paint pen they need, and they'll say, "Just white." Unfortunately, I have to tell them we have 10 different whites, which leads to some back and forth because they think, "It's white, how hard is that?" For context, I'm a 25-year-old woman. There's a bit of a stereotype against women in the car industry, especially with the older generation. There's this one auto body manager who calls and always asks for one of my male coworkers, even though I'm the only one who deals with wholesale accounts, including his auto body shop. Whenever he calls, my coworkers and I put him on hold for about 15 minutes and force him to talk to me. Now, on to the story. I work at the parts back desk but was on break one day eating lunch in the cafeteria. I was wearing a dealership jacket with the company logo and a name tag that clearly says Amy, Parts Assistant Manager, on my chest. I saw my coworker Kyle talking to an older gentleman. Kyle's a newer employee, and this was one of the first times he was covering the front desk on his own. He'd had no issues before, but I could see he was getting flustered. When he made eye contact with me, he waved for help. I didn't mind and went over to assist. The older gentleman, let's call him Rick for storytelling purposes, was looking for some kind of cover for his sedan, but couldn't explain exactly what he needed. Rick looked clearly agitated that Kyle couldn't read his mind, saying things like, "It's a cover in the engine area, it's right there when you open it. It's easy." Kyle had pulled up a picture of the engine bay of the same model sedan, asking him to point it out, but Rick kept saying his car didn't look like that and it shouldn't be so difficult. I stepped in and asked, "Do you have your vehicle's VIN so we can pull up the proper information?" Rick asked gruffly, "Who are you?" I kept my customer service smile and said, "I'm Amy. Kyle's pretty new here, so hopefully I can help. If we can get your VIN, I can get a better idea of what you're looking for, sir." Rick looked at me in disbelief and said, "You work here? I don't need your help. This is a man's job. I just need a cover for the thing in my engine." I tried to ignore his sexist comment, "This kind of thing happens," and asked, "Well, what's the cover for? Is it an engine cover, a cap for fluid, or something else?" He snapped, "It's a cover! Why is it so difficult for you guys to understand? I need a cover for one of the things in the engine." At this point, Rick's voice had raised, catching the attention of employees and customers alike. You could see everyone glancing over. I said, "Sir, there are many different covers. I need specifics so I don't give you the wrong item. Can we go to your vehicle so we can take a look at exactly what you need?" Rick's face was red with frustration, and he said, "My car's at home because I need the cover before I can drive it. This is ridiculous. Where's your manager?" Oh, the dreaded, "Where's your manager?" question. Unfortunately for Rick, my manager was out for meetings that day. Fortunately for me, this meant I, the assistant manager, was the only person he could deal with, and I was ready to stand my ground. I said, "I'm the acting manager today, actually." Rick glared at me with disdain and shouted, "No, there's no way a woman is the manager of this. Get me a man." We have a policy at work where, if a customer becomes belligerent, we can ask them to leave. I didn't get the chance that day though because another customer, a man who was next in line, came charging up and put Rick in his place. "I'll call this Savior Bruce." Bruce said, "Hey, what's your problem? They're trying to help you, and you're just giving them grief for everything they do." Rick yelled back, "These fools can't figure out what I want. I need a real man who runs the place." Bruce barked, "That's because you're too clueless to give them enough information to know what you want. How are they supposed to figure it out if you're too vague to tell them? All you're repeating is that it's a cover." Rick snapped, "I shouldn't have to over-explain myself. This is their job and they obviously can't do it because a woman is running the department." Bruce retorted, "Listen, pal. Her not understanding you isn't because she's a woman. It's because you're not making sense." The argument went on for a bit, with Kyle and me standing at the counter watching this heated exchange. Both men were inching closer to each other, while salespeople, customers, financial advisors, and service techs peeked around the corner to watch the drama unfold. Rick eventually threw his arms up in defeat, shouting, "This is ridiculous! I'm never coming back here!" and stormed off. It was a bit awkward afterward when Bruce turned to us with a huge smile and asked if we were okay. He said he couldn't stand ignorant people and wasn't okay with how the older man treated us, especially when we were just trying to help. We thanked Bruce a lot, said he really didn't have to defend us like that, and gave him a small discount on the oil he bought. The unfortunate part is that we never found out what cover Rick wanted, and we never saw him again. I have friends who work in service and parts departments at car dealerships, and they tell me this kind of thing happens daily. People come in not knowing what they want for their car, and it's really frustrating. I'm also curious what that cover Rick wanted was. I guess we'll never know. This next story is titled, "Can I Talk to the Doctor?" This story is a bit different because it was me mistaking someone else's identity and job. A few years back I got really sick. I was sneezing like crazy, my eyes were itchy, and I had a very painful sore throat. I was coughing a lot, but my throat felt swollen and dry and it was very raw. My voice started to go raspy, and it hurt even to swallow water. After a couple of days it wasn't going away, so my girlfriend convinced me to see a doctor at a walk-in clinic. We had Googled my symptoms, and I was convinced it was allergies that would go away on their own. My girlfriend, however, thought it was strep throat, and was adamant I get medicine before I spread it around. Fine. As usual, I had to wait forever in the waiting room. Then when they put me in a room, I waited forever again. A nurse came in to take my blood pressure and temperature at one point. Not long after, a second nurse came in to take it again because the info didn't save in the system. Then a third nurse came in and started taking my blood pressure again because their system lost it once more. He grumbled a bit, but struck up a conversation with me at the same time. "Don't know what's going on with our computers today," he said. "I'm going to write this down on paper this time and log it. Sorry about that. Are you not feeling well today?" "No," I rasped. "My throat is killing me. I think it's allergies, but my girlfriend thinks it's strep throat." "Well, your voice doesn't sound very good. Why do you think it's allergies?" "This happens to me every year, and it usually goes away after a while," I replied. The nurse finished taking my blood pressure, wrote down some notes, and asked what symptoms I had. I told him my throat was raw, felt swollen, and it hurt to swallow anything. I was also sneezing a lot, sometimes uncontrollably. The nurse grabbed his phone and started typing my symptoms into it, which I thought was odd. Then he took a tongue depressor, looked inside my mouth and said, "Well, I'm certain you have strep throat on top of your allergies. You'll need some medication to help with the strep." "Oh, okay," I said awkwardly, trying not to be rude. How long do you think it'll take for the doctor to see me so he can write me a prescription?" He looked at me funny and said, "I am the doctor. Who did you think I was?" "A nurse," I replied. The guy never introduced himself when he came in and was dressed in scrubs like the other nurses, so I completely mistook him for a nurse. So, yeah, that's my story. I had a weird experience with a doctor once too. I told him my symptoms and he pulled out his phone and did the same thing this person described. I thought he was Googling my symptoms. Then he even went to ask a colleague if my symptoms matched his diagnosis. I had no idea what was going on, but it was so strange and seemed super sketchy. After reading these stories, I've been thinking a lot about them. Story 1. I'm a photographer, not a mischievous teen. I felt bad for the narrator, mistaken for a creepy teen when he was just doing his job. The dad's protective instinct was understandable, but storming over without asking questions was overkill. I'd have unzipped my jacket sooner to show the logo. His ongoing awkwardness is hilarious. He's probably mortified. I agree, sitting in the bleachers would have looked sketchier than standing courtside. A staff badge or visible uniform could have prevented this. The dad's a nice guy deep down, but assumptions bite. I'd have laughed it off afterward. Story 2, shabbily dressed guy actually does work in the building, dude. The guard's arrogance berating a homeless man who owned the legal firm was satisfyingly ironic. I love how the narrator stayed calm while the guard raged. Karma hit hard with his firing. Treating everyone respectfully is key. I'd have enforced that policy strictly. The shabby clothes fooled him, but appearances deceive. I bet the guard learned his lesson. The president's swift action shows good management. I'd have relished escorting him out. This story proves humility wins in professional settings. Story 3, entitled Karen Gets Hurt Because She Doesn't Listen. The lady's refusal to heed the glass warning was her downfall. Slipping on it was poetic justice. I admire the narrator's helpfulness despite being off-duty. The gift card was a nice perk. Her sexist assumptions about women in parts are outdated and annoying. I'd have been tempted to say "I told you so" louder. Witnesses backing the narrator was key. The bright green glass was unmissable. Her denial was ridiculous. This highlights why listening matters in stores. Story 4. I do work here, and you need to go. The group's sneaky wine smuggling was cheeky, but the narrator's firm enforcement was spot on. Dropping the owner bluff when cornered was pathetic. I'd have banned them permanently for lying. The next day's demand to lift the ban showed entitlement. Calling the owner as friends backfired hilariously. I love the narrator's calm authority. In family-friendly spots, rules protect everyone. I'd have enjoyed watching them squirm. Story 5, security, this kid is trying to steal? Deborah's ageist outburst, refusing to accept a younger supervisor, was comical and sad. Snatching the purse was unhinged. I'd have called security sooner. Rhonda's quick firing was justified, no room for insubordination. The narrator's composure was impressive. I bet Deborah regretted her assumptions. In offices, respect trumps age. I'd have loved seeing her face when realizing the kid was the boss. Story 6. Get me your male manager. Rick's vague cover demands were exasperating. How could anyone guess? His sexism, insisting on a real man, was outdated garbage. Bruce's intervention was heroic. I'd have applauded him. The discount was a nice touch. I'd have banned Rick for his attitude. In auto parts, patience is key, but entitlement tests it. Curious what that mysterious cover was. Engine bay riddle unsolved. Story 7. Can I talk to the doctor? The narrator's mix-up, mistaking the doctor for a nurse in scrubs, was understandable but awkward. I'd have introduced myself clearly as the doctor. The phone typing seemed suspicious at first. No harm done, but always clarify roles. I've had similar confusions. Scrubs blur lines. The raspy voice story adds humor. In clinics, assumptions lead to funny moments. And that wraps up another episode of our I Do Work Here Lady series. If you didn't catch my last episode, check it out. Thanks for hanging out with me today and listening to these stories.